Look at me, here I am, right where I belong. Kermit the Frog, Muppets Take Manhattan, 1983. Hello, it's Andrew Larson's Easter movie review channel. This is an Easter movie review special. We'll be reviewing Easter movies and Easter movies exclusively. There are a lot of eggs in the basket this evening. 1, 2, 3. 3 movies. The first film that I'll be reviewing, Quentin Dupois' Smoking Causes Coughing. The second film that I'll be reviewing, A Good Person by Zach Braff, auteur, white auteur. For the number 3. This is the third film that I'm reviewing in this video, but it's actually the fourth film in a series of films, John Wick Chapter 4, directed by Chad Stahelski. Okay, alright, the first movie that I'll be reviewing, this movie, Smoking Causes Coughing, from French filmmaker Quentin Dupois, also known as electronic musician Mr. Wiseau. Not a good movie. It's one of the worst movies I've seen in the last month. I'm not someone who's ever seen any of Quentin Dupois' films, but I'm someone that truly loves the electronic music of one Mr. Wiseau. I'm familiar with his movies. I've seen clips and trailers of like Rubber and Wrong Cops, or whatever these movies are called. And I don't know, I've just gotten the feeling that these movies aren't for me, they aren't something I'd like, and I didn't like this one. I've only seen this one, so I can't say for certain, but it seems like, based on what I know about all of his movies, this is probably the worst of his movies. It doesn't even have any of his crazy electronic beats in it. Spoiler-free review. So this is like not a movie. This is like Quentin Dupois was asked to make a sketch comedy series for Adult Swim, and he only made like a season of it, and he compiled the season into a movie. And if you know Adult Swim shows, they're only about 70 minutes a season. This is a season of crap from Adult Swim that didn't make it onto the air. These are sketches that don't go together in any way. None of the sketches have much value on their own. I did laugh a couple of times, so I can't say it's a terrible movie, but I can say that it's not a movie and that you should never watch it unless you're stupid. Spoiler review. I'm not someone who's like averse to the notion of a sketch comedy movie. One of my favorite movies is Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. Like Monty Python's The Meaning of Life, this is a movie that attempts to tie itself together thematically with a theme of how absurd human life is. I can't say whether it's the quality of the sketches that makes this movie so much worse at being coherent and meaningful than Monty Python's The Meaning of Life, or if it's just the fact that it's so half-baked in the way that it's all strewn together. Probably a little bit of both. The name of the movie is Smoking Causes Coughing, which is true, and it's triggering to me personally because I smoke and I cough all the time. That's a strike against the movie right there. The name of the movie comes from the sketch that ties all the sketches together, which is about like a Power Rangers-esque team that calls itself like the Tobacco Force or something. And they're like anti-smoking, and each member of the force is named after a different carcinogen. So there's like nicotine and mercury and asbestos maybe. I didn't know going into this movie that it was going to be sketches. So it started off with this Power Rangers thing, and I thought the whole movie was going to be like this, and I thought that was promising. This tokusatsu Power Rangers type sketch is good for a couple minutes, but it really doesn't have much up its sleeve. You got the fact that they're in Power Ranger costumes, you got the fact that they're named after carcinogens, and you got like 1.5 monster battles, and you got a rat puppet. And this rat puppet, which is their leader, it's like the Tobacco Force's master that they report to vis-a-vis the video screen. this rat puppet is the greatest thing in the movie. And it's ripped directly from a much better movie, Peter Jackson's Meet the Feebles. There is an identical rat puppet in that movie. 10 minutes into this movie, I was enjoying the tokusatsu battle, and I was enjoying the rat puppet, and then I realized that's all this movie had. It gets to a scene where the Power Rangers characters start telling each other stories, and then it just turns into a sketch movie with these unrelated sketches that barely come together with this theme of how absurd it is to live on the planet Earth. You want me to tell you what these sketches were even about? I don't know, because I can't remember. One of them was about a lady who puts on like an isolation helmet that is like supposed to help you think, and she thinks, and she decides to murder her husband and their friends, and it's like existential. There's another sketch where it's like a guy going into a grinder on accident, and he ends up turning into mush, and the mush is still alive, and he talks with like a mouth, and it's like weird CGI. There weren't all that many sketches in this movie. None of them have very much value on their own, and they have even less value stitched together in this way. The next movie that I'll be reviewing is a much better movie, in my opinion. This is a movie from Zach Braff. Zach Braff, the auteur filmmaker who is responsible for such iconic cult classics as Garden State and I don't know what else. He made Scrubs, I guess. He was like a creative force on Scrubs. He was like a writer and a director on it, I guess, and he like chose some of the songs that went into the Scrubs soundtrack. I'm no like big Zach Braff fan. I liked Garden State as a kid. I had the DVD. I bought the DVD when I was like 10 years old, and I watched it like a couple times, a handful of times. I just thought it was like silly, funny movie. Between the ages of like 11 and 13, I probably watched it like 4 times, and that's it. The movie didn't have like a big influence on me personally, on like my romantic life or my music choices. I'm someone who heard of the Shins from Gilmore Girls, not from Garden State. I was a little kid. The romantic elements of the movie did not register to me at all. I didn't think of the movie as a romance, I just thought of it as like a silly stoner comedy, like a Harold and a Kumar. I've meant to revisit that movie, but I never have. I should probably do it. This might inspire me to do it, because this new movie I thought was pretty cool. Zach Braff has made a couple of movies in between Garden State and this new one right here. I never seen those movies. I like just ignored them completely when they came out. There's one about old people and another one I think about old people. And this new one is about old people too. And it's also about Florence Pugh. Spoiler-free review. I really love this movie, A Good Person. I think it's a dark masterpiece of cinema. And I think everyone should go see this movie. It's incredible. A James L. Brooks style humanist dramedy for the ages, for kids and adults, for everyone of all races and sexualities. Zach Braff is obviously a master of cinema, and he's a genius writer and director, and this is one of the best. It doesn't really have all that much like obnoxious music on the soundtrack, except for Florence Pugh herself, who has like sings a bunch of songs on the soundtrack. But I like that. I thought that was pretty cool. If you're gonna have Florence Pugh, you're gonna have her giving this weird performance, and you're gonna have her be singing all the songs on the soundtrack. That's an A+ move. Alright, spoiler review. So this movie's a big starring vehicle for Florence Pugh, and I guess her and Zach Braff were like a romantic item, and it's pretty weird if that's so, because this is like a kind of like a fetish film, because Florence Pugh is dressed up as Zach Braff for much of this movie. She cuts her hair to look like Zach Braff. She's wearing like Nick Cave shirts and stuff. Zach Braff probably just went in his closet and he picked out all his twee boy cool band indie clothes, And he was like, "Where are these, Florence Pug?" She's riding around on a bicycle through this small town like a little twee boy Donnie Darko. She's dark and depressed. She can sing. Florence Pug is a character who was engaged to marry a man, and she was driving a car with that man's sister and the sister's husband. Florence Pug looked at her phone. A construction vehicle accidentally came out in the street in front of them. Florence Pug didn't see it in time. She swerves in a way where she's protected, and the sister and the husband get the brunt of the impact, and they die. She becomes depressed. In the depression, she breaks up with her fiance, who is still with her through the trauma, even though he's upset. And she becomes addicted to pills. And the fiance has a father that he's estranged from. He's been estranged from, and he becomes even more estranged from after the accident, because this father really blames the character of Florence Pug, and this father is Morgan Freeman. And guess what? Florence Pug decides to get clean from the painkillers. She goes to a meeting, and Morgan Freeman is there too, because he's an alcoholic, and it's fate. And they bond. They bond. Morgan Freeman has forgiven Florence Pug, and Florence Pug is messed up enough to befriend this old black man. It's revealed that Morgan Freeman was an abusive father. He beat the fiancé as a kid until the fiancé bled out of his ear and could never hear again. And the fiancé never told Florence Pug the truth about how he lost his hearing. He told her that it was a birth defect. And she learns the truth from Morgan Freeman as they bond. Another big part of the movie is that Morgan Freeman has been entrusted with the care of his granddaughter, whose parents died, the sister and the husband that died. He's an old, curmudgeonly man, and he has no idea how to handle this burgeoning young woman, this burgeoning young black woman. His solution is to get her on birth control pills. Well, that's the biggest flaw of the movie, is that there's a plot involving that it's a good thing to get 16-year-old girls put on birth control, which I think is not a good thing. I don't know. But that's society, that's the world, that's the way that life is, and movies are simply a reflection of that. I can't hold the values of society against a work of humanist art. As Morgan Freeman and Florence Pug bond, there's conflict, but they all learn to become better people in the end. Morgan Freeman character passes away. He has a cool model train set. He leaves Florence Pug a note on the model train set, and he says, "Get back with my son and help him raise this foster daughter that I couldn't take care of and whose parents you killed." And she does, on her own volition. It's not like she feels guilty. She wants to get back together with her former fiancé. And Florence Pug's character, she also has a nice support network of her own. She has a nice mother, played by Molly Shannon, the great Molly Shannon. Fantastic cast all around. No Zach Braff in the movie. He just wrote and directed it. It doesn't seem like a lot of people are into this movie based on reviews I've seen, but I really loved it. Some of the criticisms I saw were that it's like not an accurate portrayal of addiction. I've struggled with addiction in my own life. I've had times where I've gotten blackout drunk every night for months on end. I've been in the justice system. I've been to counseling with people that were on drugs and who were drug addicts. I've never personally been to an AA meeting. As someone in that position, this movie rang pretty true to me. Florence Pug is awesome in this movie. She's awesome in a lot of movies. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name. I don't think it's Florence Pug, but I've never learned how to pronounce her name right. I meant to do it before making this review. I'll do it next time. I'm going to pronounce her name right. I also recently saw her in Black Widow, and wow, she's great in that movie. Great in all the movies. The greatest actress. I feel like interested in checking out Zach Braff's movies that I haven't seen. Definitely going to be revisiting Garden State, looking at that movie. I'm someone who's generally pretty willing to forgive movies that have problematic elements. I don't know. It's just one person's vision. I'm someone who thinks Scott Pilgrim is a good movie. I don't think it's a romantic movie, but but I think it's a good movie. I think it's a funny movie. I think you could view it the same way as you'd view a film about, like, BDSM bondage. And alright. And I'm going to be reviewing one last movie. And this movie is the movie that you've all been waiting for. It's the greatest film of all time. The #1 action blockbuster ever created. John Wick Chapter 4. Psych. Spoiler-free review? Yeah. I saw John Wick Chapter 4, and I'd never seen any of the prior John Wick films. I walked in blind. And wow, I really was impressed. Like, I thought it was really great. Pretty great. Like a B+. I was like, I'm going to watch all the other John Wick movies now, and I bet they're all going to be great too. And then I watched all 3 of the other John Wick movies, and by the time I was done with the 3rd one, I had, like, slightly lowered my opinion on this one, John Wick Chapter 4. But I still think this is definitely the best one. I think you should do what I did, go in blind to this one, and then not watch the other 3, because those ones aren't very great. They're fine, but they really pale in comparison to this one, and there's nothing in those movies you can't get from this one 100 times better. Looking at this movie on its own, it's like a really great action movie for American standards, and it's worth the 3 hours even if there's some stuff weighing it down. Looking at the franchise as a whole, not worth watching 10 hours of at all, and it's really redundant and repetitive, and it goes absolutely nowhere. Spoiler review? This movie's just more John Wick running around doing stuff because of a dog and his wife. He's immortal except when the movie wants him to be in danger. He's just a vessel for all these action sequences. The wife and dog died, and he's mad, so he kills everybody. There are action sequences in nightclubs. There's like lots of neon lights and techno music. This one's got the cool techno music. This one's got banging techno music. The 3rd movie, John Wick, it had more like orchestral breakbeats, and I didn't like that quite as much. This one's back to the pure techno banging. This movie reminded me a lot of the video game Hotline Miami. It has that same kind of Hotline Miami soundtrack, and it also has like a scene that just felt like Hotline Miami. Hotline Miami, if no one's ever played it, is an overhead action game. I'm sure most people have played it, and they'll know just what I'm talking about. One of the best scenes from this movie was just a Hotline Miami scene. That's kind of like both the good thing and the bad thing about John Wick, is that it's really like not original at all. It's taking things from other things, taking aesthetics and taking action, and just taking story elements and putting them all together into this package that's consistent and, I guess, slightly above average as a whole. This really isn't something that I think transcends its influences in a way like Kill Bill or something like that. I think this movie is about as good as Hard Boiled, which isn't my favorite John Woo movie. I'd say Hard Target is probably my favorite of the John Woo movies I've seen, followed by Mission Impossible 2. I don't think anything in the John Wick franchises reaches those heights, but I do think, at its best, this John Wick 4 is about as good as Hard Boiled. The 3rd movie was lacking in terms of its score. I also felt it was lacking in terms of its action. This movie definitely has the best action in the franchise. Really awesome action. Plenty of it, even if it's not for the full 3 hours. There's a weird sequence towards the end of the movie where it pulls a Family Guy, and it just, like, does a really hard Warriors homage, an homage to the movie The Warriors, where it's like, okay, boppers, John Wick is out there, and there's a big hit on John Wick. And then it plays Nowhere to Run, Nowhere to Hide, or whatever, from the movie The Warriors, which is a much, 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 much better movie than this movie is. The Warriors is one of the best movies ever. It has better action than this movie, and it means something, and it's beautiful. It has an original aesthetic that's timeless, and this movie has a derivative aesthetic that is always going to be very much of this time. I don't see these movies outside of sequences of this 4th one being remembered for very long. Just the other night I was rewatching The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions, and I saw John Wick director Chad Stahelski's name in the end credits as the martial arts stunt coordinator. And those are far better action movies. The man went from stunt coordinator to director, and it very much feels like that. This isn't a movie or a franchise that feels like it has a whole lot of substance outside of the action element. The only substance there is comes from the parallel with Keanu Reeves' real personal life. Of course, the character of John Wick lost his dog and his wife. Keanu Reeves, if anyone doesn't know, he lost his wife, and he also, before she died, they had a child that was stillborn, and both those things affected Keanu a lot. There's a line in this movie where it's like everything John Wick touches dies, and you know Keanu is like an executive producer on this movie. He has a lot of input. I'm sure it's no coincidence that this is the character that Keanu has chosen as his the icon of his renaissance. That is certainly an interesting thing about these movies, but it's not something that's really explored at all. It adds like a subtextual depth, kind of. It made me want to go home and reread the story of Keanu's personal life, but it didn't make me feel much when I was sitting in the theater. It did make me wonder if this is supposed to be like a parallel of his personal life. Who is Keanu trying to get revenge against? The Illuminati?